Imagine you've spent 67 years building something. You've survived oil shocks, financial collapses, a global pandemic, and multiple trade wars. Your company has never, not once, posted a losing year. And then, in 2024, it happens for the first time. That's exactly what just hit Honda, not a startup. Not some second-tier manufacturer struggling to find its footing. Honda, one of the most recognized automotive brands on the planet, a company that had gone nearly 7 decades without a single year in the red. And Honda isn't alone. Nissan is planning to cut 20,000 jobs and shut down factories across multiple continents. Japanese car sales in China have dropped 30% in just 5 years. And Japan's market share across Southeast Asia, territory they essentially owned, has collapsed from 70% to 57% in just 2 years. The auto industry is the crown jewel of the Japanese economy. It represents 3% of the country's GDP, a fifth of all industrial output, and directly employs 5.5 million people. We're talking about an industry worth $300 billion, more than the entire GDP of Portugal. And right now, that industry is facing the worst crisis in its history. But here's the question nobody seems to answer properly. How is it possible that the companies who literally invented modern manufacturing are being swept off the map? Because that's the real paradox here. Toyota, Honda, and Nissan are not careless companies. They are the companies that taught the world how to build things better, faster, and with fewer mistakes. The same companies that brought Detroit to its knees. The same companies that scared Ronald Reagan so badly, he slapped 100% tariffs on Japanese products just to keep them from swallowing the entire American auto industry. So what went so wrong? The answer is uncomfortable. The very system that took them to the top is exactly what's pulling them under. To understand that, we need to go back to 1950. Japan has just emerged from the war, devastated. Toyota is producing 2,500 vehicles a year. In that same period, Ford's River Rouge plant is producing 7,000 cars a day, not per year. Per day, the gap is so enormous it seems impossible to close. But an engineer named Taiichi Ono traveled to the United States, spent weeks studying American factories, and came back to Japan with a conclusion nobody expected. The American model was brilliant, but it wouldn't work in Japan. Not because Japan was inferior, but because it was different. The Japanese market was small and fragmented. They needed trucks, sedans, tractors, and vans all at once, in quantities that couldn't justify Ford-style megafactories. Labor was expensive. Capital for importing cutting-edge machinery was scarce. The constraints that should have crushed Toyota became, in Ono's hands, the foundation of something revolutionary. The core idea was simple but radical. No part would move to the next stage of assembly unless it was perfect. At Ford, if there was a defect somewhere in the line, they kept going and figured out at the end whether it could be fixed or had to be scrapped. Ono proposed the exact opposite: stop, fix, move forward. He also developed just-in-time manufacturing. Think of it like cooking without a pantry. Instead of stocking ingredients for weeks, just in case you need them, you receive exactly what you're going to use today, at the moment you need it. Zero waste, zero capital sitting idle on a shelf. The results were historic. In 1986, General Motors needed 30 hours to assemble a single car. Toyota did it in 15. GM made 130 assembly errors for every 100 vehicles. Toyota made 45. And while American manufacturers were sitting on parts stockpiles that lasted 15 days, Toyota was turning them over in hours. With worse machines, with less capital, with a smaller home market. This system became known as lean production, and today it is the global standard for manufacturing. Not just cars, everything. from hospitals to smartphone factories to airline maintenance crews. Japan didn't just dominate the auto market, it taught the world how to produce. And then the electric car arrived, and everything broke. Not because the Japanese didn't see it coming. They saw it. The problem is, they chose the wrong answer. When Tesla started gaining serious traction and China began making its move, Japanese manufacturers made a decision that seemed reasonable at the time. Double down on hybrids and hydrogen. Technologies where they already had an edge. Familiar ground. Toyota, to their credit, got it right. Today, they dominate the hybrid market in a way nobody else can touch. And they've actually held their market share even in China. But the rest of the industry wasn't so fortunate. Honda launched its first mass-produced electric vehicle in 2024. It arrived late, generated weak demand, and the company is now flirting with its first annual loss since 1957. Nissan built a factory in Sunderland, England, that was running at 30% of its capacity because there simply wasn't enough demand to fill it. They launched the Leaf to try to turn things around. It got them to 50%, and now they're considering either closing the plant or selling it outright to a Chinese company. It wouldn't be the first time. It already happened in South Africa. It already happened in Barcelona, where Chinese automaker Chery acquired the industrial complex Nissan walked away from. But why did companies this agile fail to make the jump? Why did the same system that made them unbeatable for decades completely fall apart when it mattered most? The answer lies in the nature of the change itself. Lean production is a system built for incremental improvement. It is perfectly engineered to optimize what already exists. Its workers are masters at taking a base model and refining it, adjusting it, making it better iteration by iteration. In the 1980s, Toyota could bring a new model to market in 46 months, with 485 people involved in the development process. In the United States, the same process took 60 months and 900 people. But an electric vehicle is not an improved combustion engine. It's a computer on wheels, literally. The internal combustion engine, the transmission, the exhaust system, the fuel tank, all of it disappears. What remains is a battery pack, an electric motor, and above all, software. Roughly 40% of the value of an electric vehicle sits in the battery, not in the bodywork, not in the design, not in decades of accumulated assembly expertise, and that is precisely where Japan has no advantage. Chinese giant BYD, Build Your Dreams, dominates battery manufacturing in a way no Japanese company can currently match. It's not just that they're cheaper, it's that they control the entire supply chain from raw materials to finished cell. That's a structural advantage that takes years, possibly decades, to replicate. Nissan and Honda actually tried to merge specifically to address this problem. Securing a reliable battery supply was one of the central pillars of the proposed deal. But the merger never happened, and both companies are now facing that challenge separately, with less firepower than they need. As if all of that weren't enough, there's a market that rarely gets mentioned in coverage of Japan's auto crisis. And it turns out to be critically important: the Middle East. In 2024, Japan exported 525,000 vehicles to the region. That's 12% of total production. Double what they sell across all of Latin America. A market with strong profit margins, particularly on SUVs, and growth that pushed exports to 800,000 units in 2025. It was the perfect cushion, a place to recover ground being lost in Asia. Until the conflict with Iran intensified, and Nissan's sales in the region dropped by half almost overnight. The safety net had disappeared, and the damage doesn't stop at lost exports. 70% of the aluminum used by Japan's auto industry passes through the Strait of Hormuz. The country's dependence on Gulf gas and oil is nearly total. Every time tensions rise in that region, Japanese manufacturing costs go up, margins get squeezed, and companies have less room to absorb the hits coming from everywhere else. And the hits keep coming. Because while Japan was losing ground in Asia and watching the Middle East become complicated, Donald Trump decided to open another front. This isn't the first American trade war with Japan. In the 1980s, Reagan imposed restrictions so severe on Japanese products that he called them, with remarkable creativity, voluntary export restraints. Tariffs as high as 100% on certain sectors, sustained diplomatic pressure, and even then, in 1989, the best-selling car in the United States was the Honda Accord, ahead of the Ford Taurus. Japan survived that, but this time, the situation is more dangerous, because Trump's tariffs arrived at the worst possible moment, when the industry was already wounded. The numbers shifted multiple times within months. First, a 27.5% tariff, then reduced to 15%, then theoretically down to 2.5% for finished vehicles, though many individual components still face a 25% duty. The uncertainty itself, more than the actual tariff levels, paralyzed decision-making across the industry. Honda delayed construction of a new Canadian factory by 2 years while it calculated whether it made more sense to produce directly on American soil to avoid the tariffs altogether. Other companies froze investments. Supply chains were restructured under extreme time pressure. The result: Japan sold 10% fewer vehicles to the United States. On its own, that might seem manageable. But to avoid losing even more market share, Japanese manufacturers cut prices. And that 10% drop in units sold translated into a 30% drop in revenue. When you're selling less and charging less at the same time, the damage compounds fast. So is the Japanese auto industry finished? No. But it's not in a position to pretend nothing has changed either. What we're witnessing is a forced transformation. The model that worked for 60 years is under a kind of pressure it was never designed to handle. And the companies that come out the other side will be the ones that understand this is no longer about optimizing what exists. It's about building something entirely new from the ground up. Toyota, for now, is navigating this better than the rest. Its hybrid strategy has bought the company oxygen and time. But time isn't infinite, and even Toyota knows the window won't stay open forever. The rest of the industry is accelerating its collaboration with China at a pace that would have seemed unthinkable a decade ago. Nissan isn't just selling off factories, it's co-developing new engines, new battery systems, and new vehicle platforms with Chinese partners. It's cutting its model lineup from 56 to 45 vehicles, and reorganizing production around 3 core design families. To recover the economies of scale it's been losing, the Japanese industry as a whole is recalibrating its alliances, looking less toward Washington and more toward Beijing than any analyst would have predicted 5 years ago. There's a lesson in all of this that reaches far beyond the auto sector. The system that carries you to the top can become your greatest obstacle. When the rules of the game change, not because the system is flawed, it was extraordinary, but because it was built for a world that no longer exists. Toyota understood that in time. The rest of Japan's auto industry is learning that lesson now, at considerable cost. The question isn't whether Japan will survive this crisis. It will. The question is, what version of Japan comes out the other side? If this gave you something to think about, drop a comment below. I'd genuinely like to know which strategic mistake you think cost the Japanese industry the most. And if you want to keep understanding how the global economy actually works, subscribe to the channel. Every week, a new topic. No filler, no fluff. See you in the next one.